The gavel cracked against the bench, silencing the room. "Greedy," the judge said flatly, his eyes cutting into me. Richard leaned back beside me, smirking, his voice dripping with contempt. "She's nothing without my name." From the gallery, Clara turned away, shame and anger clouding her face. I clutched the documents tighter to my chest, my years of sacrifice erased in a single word: greedy. The first betrayal wasn't infidelity. It was the night I pawned my wedding ring to pay off Richard's failed investment. The clerk's pitying eyes, the cold counter, the symbol of my vows slid away in silence. That was the start of my sacrifices. Now, under the harsh courtroom lights, those sacrifices were twisted into accusations. Richard adjusted his tie, smirk curling. "Your Honor, I carried this family." She only ever cared about money. Even Clara flinched at the words. My own daughter, poisoned by Richard's whispers, ready to testify against me. From the back row, Nancy couldn't hold back. "Funny, I remember her working 3 jobs while you slept in." Laughter rippled. Richard's glare cut sharp, but I stayed still, my fingers brushing the sealed envelope in my lap, the one secret strong enough to destroy every lie. Judge Miller leaned forward. "Mrs. Parker, if you have anything to defend yourself with, speak now, or lose your claim entirely." I inhaled. For the first time in years, my voice cut through the silence. "I have something," I said, and slowly, with trembling hands, I slid the envelope across the table. Before we dive deeper into the storm of betrayal and justice, let me pause for just a moment. If you're watching this, don't forget to subscribe to Twist Stories and turn on the notification bell. Here, you'll always find stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and the twists that change everything. You're watching from where? Drop a comment below, because sometimes the next story might echo your own life. The envelope froze midway across the polished oak, as if afraid to breathe. Dalton shot to his feet, his chair scraping like a blade. "Objection, Your Honor! We have no chain of custody. This so-called evidence must be excluded." Judge Miller's gaze slid from the trembling envelope to me, steady and cold. "Mrs. Parker, your time will come. For now, we proceed. Mr. Dalton, your witness." Dalton buttoned his jacket with a snap. "Let's begin with the man who built this family." Richard strode forward, chin lifted, basking in the light like it was a stage lamp. He swore the oath as if it were another performance. "Mr. Parker," Dalton purred, "tell us about your sacrifices." Richard folded his hands, a portrait of false nobility. "I built everything. The house, the business, the future." "She?" He tilted his chin toward me, lips curling. "She was always the worrier. She's nothing without my name." The words dropped heavy, rippling across the gallery. A few heads nodded, lies rehearsed so long they sounded like truth. My gaze fell to my hands clean today. But I remembered the burns from bleach, the blisters from carrying boxes at dawn, hands that had patched together a life from scraps, from prayers no one heard. Dalton circled like a wolf. "And did Mrs. Parker ever contribute to your ventures?" Richard's laugh sliced the air. "She never earned a dime worth mentioning." From the back row, Nancy bit her cheek until it stung. I felt her anger pressing at my shoulders like heat, but I kept my silence. Dalton pivoted to the judge. "Your Honor, her sudden interest in assets proves a long obsession with money. People like her want reward without risk." A murmur rolled. Somewhere, a pen clicked like a ticking clock. I glanced at Clara. My daughter's arms were folded, jaw clenched, eyes shadowed by confusion. A child pretending to face the tide, but already sinking. Dalton's smile sharpened. "Didn't she try to block your latest loan, Mr. Parker?" Richard smirked. "She always said no." Small minds say no. My chest tightened. I could have told them about the collector's calling, about hiding in the pantry so Clara wouldn't see me count coins. I could have told them about pawning my ring, but not yet. Dalton raised a file. Exhibit D, unexplained withdrawals. Numbers blurred on the page, each line a scar I knew by heart. Payroll I covered when Richard forgot. Tuition I scraped from night shifts, gas money from crumpled tips. The judge glanced at me. You'll have your chance to respond. Dalton smoothed his tie. No further questions, for now. Call Clara Parker heels clicked like hammers as Clara approached. She looked brave, but her courage was borrowed, fragile. Clara, tell us about your mother, Dalton coaxed. Clara swallowed. She hid envelopes in a tin. She said they were for rainy days, but she never explained the air. Thinned. My heart clenched. Those envelopes had paid for field trips, braces, textbooks that smelled of hope. Did she encourage your father's dreams? Clara hesitated. Richard gave her that subtle nod, the silent command he'd used for years. Not really, she whispered. She didn't believe in him. My throat burned. I remembered Clara's small hands clapping for the paper diplomas we made at the kitchen table, the same hands trembling when mocked for thrift store shoes. Hands I had shielded with sacrifices she never knew. Dalton slid another page. Is this your message from last winter? Mom's freaking out about the visa bill again. She says we have to cut back. Clara's voice barely carried. Yes, Dalton smiled. No further questions. Hart rose, her voice gentle but firm. Clara, who packed your lunches before sunrise? Clara blinked. Mom. And who drove you through rain when your father's truck was in the shop again? Mom. And who paid your application fees when the waiver window closed? Clara's whisper fell heavy. Mom. Hart nodded, stepping back. Sometimes tenderness was sharper than any blade. The room shifted. The gallery leaned in. Dalton clapped his folder, forcing brightness. One more witness, Ms. Helene Durand. My stomach nodded. Perfume drifted in before Helene's polished smile. How would you describe Mrs. Parker? Dalton asked. Helene tilted her head, voice dripping. Suspicious. Always asking where money went. She hated risk. Nancy leaned forward, voice biting. He brainstormed how to pay for your wine. A ripple of laughter. Helene's lashes lowered, feigned pity. Some women can't share the spotlight. Hart's tone was calm, deadly. Ms. Durand, are you involved financially with Mr. Parker? Helene smiled. I've invested in his potential. In cash? Or in kind? Hart asked lightly. The gallery crackled. Judge Miller's eyes lingered too long before ruling. Sustained. Hart pressed forward. Then let's call someone who saw the real sacrifices. Nancy Whitaker. Nancy walked steady, not as a weapon, but as loyalty in flesh. She swore the oath, her voice steady as stone. For 20 years we shared break rooms, carpools, and sometimes one wallet, she said. Did you see her obsession with money? Hart asked. Nancy's eyes flared. If you mean paying bills, yes. If you mean scraping coins for Clara's field trips, yes. If you mean pawning her wedding ring so Richard wouldn't face shame, absolutely. Richard spat. Hearsay. Nancy turned, unafraid. I stood beside her at the pawn counter. The clerk wrote the ticket like he was blessing a grave. The gallery stirred. My eyes brimmed. Nancy raised another folder. Timesheets scrawled in pen. 3 jobs. Morning, evening, night. I covered when she cried in the custodial closet. I told her, heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear name tags. Dalton sneered. Your Honor, this is sentimental theater. But the tide had shifted. I felt it, rising far out at sea, rushing toward the shore. Dalton made one last stab. If you weren't greedy, Mrs. Parker, why the envelopes? Why the locked tin? My chin lifted. My voice was low, steady, but rang like thunder. For rain, I said, because life gets wet. The room froze. Women leaned forward, breath caught. Judge Miller tapped his gavel. 10-minute recess. The courtroom broke into noise. Richard leaned toward Clara, smile reassembled. You did great, kiddo. Truth wins. But Clara's voice shook. Dad, did Mom really pawn her ring? Richard's jaw flexed. Don't let her theatrics sway you. Nancy brushed past me, squeezing my hand. Hold on. The tide's coming. I glanced at the sealed envelope, still waiting, still patient. Not yet, I whispered to myself, but soon. And now I want to ask you, if you were in my place, standing in that hallway with whispers swirling and doubt tapping your shoulder, what would you do? Would you open the envelope right there? Or wait for the moment that silence breaks like thunder? If this story has touched you, don't forget to subscribe to Twist Stories and turn on the notification bell. Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes another woman's fight might echo your own. The courtroom smelled of paper and old varnish, a hush pressed flat beneath the lights. Judge Miller adjusted his glasses, no longer dismissive but wary, as if he'd discovered an extra queen on a board he thought he'd mastered. "Mrs. Parker," he said, "this is your opportunity. Do you wish to proceed with the document you've been holding?" I rose. The red wax seal throbbed in my palm like a hidden pulse. For years, I'd carried this envelope like a second heart, tucked behind ribs of silence. I set it on the table. The wood was cool. My fingers did not shake this time. Richard leaned forward, a hiss in a suit. "What tricks now, Evelyn?" A letter from a friend? Another sob story? "Enough, Mr. Parker," Judge Miller cut in, one hand raised. "Let her speak." I drew breath, slow and deep, until it filled the hollow places. "Your Honor," I said, voice steady with heat, "this is my inheritance from my late aunt, Margaret Thompson. $5 million, held in trust, untouched by me, untouched by him, untouched by anyone, until now wind seemed to move through the gallery. Shoulders shifted, a sleeve whispered, a throat clicked. Clara's head snapped up, confusion bright as glass in her eyes. "Open it," the judge said. The seal cracked. Paper rustled, loud as thunder when you're waiting for judgment. The clerk unfolded pages stamped, notarized, weighted with blue ink and bank crests. He read, voice catching, "The undersigned Margaret Thompson bequeaths to her niece Evelyn Parker the sum of $5 million to remain solely under her name and control." Gasps, a cough. Richard's smirk froze, jaw hardening until a tremor rippled his cheek. Sweat purled at his temple. Dalton scrambled. "This proves nothing. She hoarded it. If anything, it is greed. She waited for the perfect moment." But the judge's eyes had changed. The old doubt was gone, replaced by something iron. "What it proves, Mr. Dalton, is that Mrs. Parker was financially independent. Your client's accusation, that she married for money, has no foundation." Richard lurched to his feet. "Impossible. She acted like we were broke, like she was scraping by." "Because we were," I said, turning at last, the edge in my voice clean as a blade. "Your debts, your failures, your excuses. I kept that trust closed to protect our daughter from the knowledge that her father was drowning us by the day. I carried that weight so you wouldn't lose face." The words hit like stones on glass. Hairline cracks ran through Richard's confidence. Clara's hand rose to her mouth. "Mom, you had money? All this time?" I stepped closer, gentling my tone. "Yes, but it wasn't for me. It was for you. So you'd never taste the hunger, the shame, the night sweats I knew by name. I wanted you to believe your father was the hero, even when I was the one stitching the roof in the rain." Clara's eyes flooded. Something old and stubborn inside her loosened, and the room felt it, like a window pried open in stale air. Judge Miller leaned in, knuckles whitening on the bench. "Mr. Parker, you accused your wife of greed while she kept a fortune untouched. Do you wish to amend your testimony?" Richard's mouth opened and closed, a fish on dry land. She manipulated me. She wanted me to beg for it." A sharp laugh snapped from the gallery. Nancy, unable to swallow it. "Beg? She worked until her hands bled while you booked consulting lunches. Don't you dare twist this." "Objection," Dalton tried. "Overruled," the judge said. patience worn to wire. The scales had moved. Everyone could feel the tilt. Clara shoved back her chair. The scrape echoed like a warning siren. She stood on trembling knees. "All this time I thought you carried us, Dad. You told me Mom was selfish, that she didn't believe in you." She turned to me, voice fraying. "But it was you. The field trips, the piano, the fees." "Yes, darling," I whispered, "all of it." Clara fell into my arms. My hand found her hair, old muscle memory, and the dam inside me finally cracked. Tears I had banked for years slipped free. In the gallery, women dabbed at their eyes. Men shifted, ashamed of the mirrors in front of them. Richard flailed, voice skewing high. "She's playing you, Clara. She always—" "Enough!" Judge Miller thundered, the gavel's pop snapping the air taut. His stare sliced to bone. "No more slander. The facts are plain. Mrs. Parker is not the one who lived off another's name." I eased Clara aside and squared to Richard, taller than I had ever stood in his shadow. "I was never after your money," I said, each word deliberate. "I was protecting my own. You called me greedy while I was the one bleeding. You called me weak while I was the one holding the roof." Silence answered, profound, resonant, louder than any cheer. It crowned me without a sound. Richard sagged. His hands trembled in his lap. The tie he'd knotted for swagger now hung crooked, like a flag at half-mast. Judge Miller's voice softened, touched with something like remorse. "Mrs. Parker, the court acknowledges your independence and your sacrifice. We will proceed with division of liabilities and assets, but let the record show the accusation of greed was unfounded." I exhaled. The breath left my ribs like a bird finally freed from a snare. But freedom isn't safety, not yet. A cornered man still has teeth. At counsel table, Dalton bent to Richard's ear, whispering hurriedly. Papers slid. Strategy rearranged itself like knives in a drawer. I watched, without flinching. Beneath my hand lay a second stack. Bills, receipts, emails, each one a breadcrumb to the debts he'd buried in our yard. I rested my palm there, claiming them. Not the way a hoarder clutches. No, the way a witness steadies the truth. For the first time, I allowed myself a small smile. Not triumph, resolve. "They think they've seen the tide?" I murmured, so only the wood and paper could hear. "But the sea hasn't even reached the rocks." The gavel cracked again. "We proceed to the next phase," Judge Miller announced. Somewhere, far off, thunder rolled. Or maybe it was only the sound of a story turning. The war was far from over. The gavel's echo had barely faded when Richard lurched forward, desperation cracking through his polished facade. "This is a setup," he barked, voice rising an octave. "She forged those documents. She's been plotting this for years, waiting until I was vulnerable." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Dalton scrambled, tugging at his client's sleeve, but Richard shrugged him off, his eyes wild. Judge Miller slammed the gavel once. "Order, Mr. Parker, control yourself." But I remained standing, tall and calm, my hand resting lightly on the stack of receipts and records I had guarded all these years. My voice was steady, cinematic in its quiet force. "No, Richard. The only one who plotted in this marriage was you, and I am done protecting your lies." I handed the clerk a folder. One by one, documents slid into evidence. Overdue loan notices, letters from creditors, bank withdrawals for cash never accounted for. The clerk's monotone filled the room. $42,000 personal loan defaulted. Credit card charges at establishments inconsistent with family use. Emails between Mr. Parker and Ms. Helene Durand. The words landed like blows. Each sheet of paper was a mirror reflecting Richard's failures. Gasps rippled when one particular email was read aloud. "Helene, I'll wire the money from Clara's tuition account tomorrow." "Evelyn never checks. She's too busy counting pennies. We'll get away to Miami soon." "Don't worry. She'll never know Clara covered her mouth, her eyes wide with betrayal." Dad, you used my tuition money, Richard flailed. That's not true. That email, it's fabricated. Nancy's voice rang from the witness bench. I saw the withdrawals. Evelyn cried in my kitchen when she realized the account was empty. Judge Miller's face hardened. Mr. Parker, these are your accounts, your passwords. The evidence is damning. Richard's mask shattered. His voice grew frantic, pleading with the very daughter he had manipulated. Clara, you believe me, don't you? I did it for us, for our future. But Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, you did it for yourself. Mom worked herself sick to pay for me, and you stole from me. She turned toward me, her voice trembling but resolute. I'm so sorry, Mom. I was wrong about everything. The gallery hushed, their collective breath drawn in. I reached for Clara's hand, squeezing it gently. You see the truth now, darling. That's all I ever wanted. Richard's desperation curdled into rage. You poisoned her against me. You always wanted her to hate me. My eyes narrowed, my tone cutting clean. No, Richard. You did that all on your own. Judge Miller cleared his throat. In light of this evidence, the court rules that Mr. Parker has no legal claim to Mrs. Parker's inheritance. Furthermore, the debts he incurred are his alone. Mrs. Z. Parker is absolved of liability. The gavel came down, sharp and final. For a moment, the room seemed to pause in awe. Once branded as greedy, I now stood vindicated. The gallery erupted in murmurs, half pity for Richard, half admiration for the woman who had borne so much and finally emerged unbroken. I reached into my folder again, pulling free a thick stack of receipts, every debt I had paid on Richard's behalf. I let them fall one by one onto the table, the paper fluttering like heavy snow. This, I said, my voice resonating with power, is the record of my silence. Every bill I covered, every sacrifice I made, I carried your shame, Richard, because I thought it would protect Clara. But today, I return it all to you. The last page landed with a thud. The symbolism was unmistakable. Richard sat frozen, his face pale, his hands trembling. For once, the man who always had an answer had nothing left to say. Clara rose, her steps shaky but determined. She walked past her father without a glance and wrapped her arms tightly around me. I believe you, Mom. I'm with you now. The gallery broke into soft applause, not the clapping of celebration, but of solidarity. Women nodded, their eyes glistening. Men shifted uncomfortably, reminded of promises they had once broken. Richard reached a hand toward Clara, his voice cracking. Sweetheart, please. Clara turned her back to him, a silent verdict more painful than any gavel. Judge Miller lifted his gavel once more. This hearing is adjourned. Mrs. Parker, you are free of all accusations. Mr. Parker, the consequences of your debts will follow you. This court stands for truth, not manipulation. The gavel struck, final and resounding. I exhaled, a sound like release, like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. Nancy hurried forward, hugging me tightly. You did it, Evelyn. You finally let them see. My lips curved into the faintest smile. I didn't do it for me. I did it for truth. Richard slumped in his chair, defeated, muttering curses no one cared to hear. Security moved closer, sensing a man too frayed to contain himself. As the room cleared, I walked slowly toward the courthouse doors, the sunlight streaming in golden beams across the marble floor. Clara held my hand. Nancy walked beside us. Behind, Richard stumbled alone through the opposite exit, his shadow long and broken against the wall. For years, he had tried to define me as greedy, small, insignificant. Now, with the truth laid bare, he was the one left diminished, nothing but a man exposed. On the courthouse steps, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I paused, looking out over the sea of faces. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to speak not in whispers, but in clarity. They called me greedy, I said, my voice firm, resonant. carrying to every ear in the crowd. But I was the one who sacrificed. I was the one who built a life from scraps, who held this family together while being torn apart. Today, justice was not only served, it was seen. And let this be a reminder, respect isn't given by blood. It's earned through love and kindness. The crowd murmured, touched. Some clapped softly, others wiped their eyes. I turned to Clara, who whispered through her tears, "I'm proud of you, Mom." For the first time in years, I smiled, a real smile, radiant with freedom. But even in victory, I felt the ache of scars long carried. I knew healing would not come overnight. There were still wounds between Clara and me to mend, dreams I had buried to reclaim. Nancy touched my shoulder. "Use that inheritance, Evelyn. Not for him, not even for Clara, for you. Go back to teaching. Go back to what you loved before he convinced you to shrink." I looked up at the sun, my eyes soft but determined. For once, the future did not frighten me. It beckoned. Behind me, Richard stumbled down the courthouse steps, ignored, invisible. A man who once thought he controlled the story, now reduced to a footnote. My voice carried softly, almost to myself. They called me greedy, but now I call myself free. And with Clara's hand in mine, I stepped forward, not into the shadow of what was lost, but into the light of what was finally mine. The sun was still high when Clara and I stepped out of the courthouse. The late afternoon light bathed the steps in gold, as if the world itself had been waiting for me to emerge free of Richard's shadow. For the first time in years, I did not bow my head to avoid whispers. I walked tall, my chin lifted, my eyes steady. Clara clung to my hand, the same way she had as a child crossing busy streets. But this time, it wasn't my daughter being led by her mother. It was two women holding each other upright, bound by truth. Nancy joined us on the steps, her face glowing with pride. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly. "That weight that's no longer yours to carry?" I paused. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. The air seemed cleaner, sharper, freer. "Yes," I said, my lips curving into a small smile. "I feel it." As we walked to the car, Clara tugged gently at my arm. "Mom, I need to say this." I turned, studying my daughter's tear-streaked face. Her voice wavered. I believed him. "I let him turn me against you. I called you names in my head. I thought you cared more about money than about us. And all along, you were saving me." I cupped her cheek, brushing away a tear with my thumb. "You were young, Clara. You wanted to believe in your father. That doesn't make you cruel. It makes you human. And I never blamed you. Not once," she broke down, falling into my arms. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "You deserve more than forgiveness," I whispered into her hair. "You deserve the truth. And now you have it." For the first time in years, Clara wept not in anger, but in release. Later, in Nancy's kitchen, the same place where I had once sat in tears, clutching bills I couldn't pay, we shared coffee. Nancy leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You've got $5 million untouched. What are you going to do now?" My gaze drifted to the window where the sky was streaked in orange and lavender. For years, I forgot who I was. I gave up my dream of teaching, of standing in front of a class and helping young minds see the world differently. Maybe it's time I go back. Nancy's smile was warm, proud. Do it. Show Clara that it's never too late to rise again. Clara reached across the table, gripping my hand. "I'll help. Whatever you need, I'll be there. You spent your life giving to me. It's my turn to give back." My eyes filled, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "Then let's build something new together. Not from shame, not from silence, from truth." Elsewhere, Richard walked alone down a dim alley behind the courthouse. The cameras that once flocked to him now ignored him. His phone buzzed with unanswered calls. Helene's number had gone silent. The weight of debts pressed heavy on his shoulders, and for the first time, he realized no one was coming to rescue him. The man who had once bragged of control was now just a figure fading into irrelevance, swallowed by the consequences of his own lies. Weeks later, I stood in a classroom for the first time in decades. Chalk dust clung to my fingertips as I wrote on the board, "Truth endures." The students, bright-eyed young adults, some not much older than Clara, watched me intently. I told them stories of literature, of lives lived in sacrifice and redemption, of characters who lost everything only to find themselves again. In those moments, I felt alive in a way I had almost forgotten. The inheritance was still there, a safety net I no longer feared to acknowledge. But more valuable than money was this, the reclaiming of my voice, my identity. At home, Clara cooked dinner with me, laughter spilling into the small kitchen. We chopped vegetables side by side, the clatter of knives like music. She glanced at me. "Do you ever regret it? Staying so long with Dad?" I paused, considering. "Regret is a heavy coat, Clara. I wore it for years. But now I see. Even in those painful years, I was shaping the woman I am today, stronger, wiser, and free." Clara nodded slowly. "Then maybe I'll learn from your story so I don't repeat it." I smiled. That's all any parent can hope for, that their children learn from the scars without carrying them. One evening, over tea, Nancy raised her cup. "To freedom," she said, "and to never letting silence steal your story again." I clinked my cup gently against hers. "To freedom. And to the women who remind us we are never alone." Months after the trial, I sat at my desk by the window, writing in my journal. I thought of the labels that had been thrown at me, greedy, small, unworthy, and I thought of the truth that had silenced them all. I closed my journal and whispered aloud, as if to the ghosts of the past, "They called me greedy. But now I call myself free." And as my voice fades, I turn to you, the one listening. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have kept silent for so long or spoken out sooner? Have you ever been called something cruel, something that erased your sacrifices, only to discover your truth was stronger? Share your story in the comments below, because here, no one suffers alone. Here, every story reminds us, injustice may shout loudly, but truth always endures. My journey is more than courtroom drama. It's the story of countless women who sacrifice unseen, who are dismissed, mislabeled, forgotten. Yet the truth is this: respect isn't given by blood or name. It is earned through love, kindness, and integrity. And no lie, no betrayal can erase the worth of a life built on quiet sacrifice. So remember, your silence does not mean weakness. Your endurance is not greed. One day when the tables turn, your truth will speak louder than any accusation. If my story touched your heart, leave a comment for me or for yourself. Share the moment you reclaimed your voice. And don't forget to subscribe to Twist Stories, where sacrifice, betrayal, and unexpected justice come alive in every tale. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Because sometimes the twist that changes everything might just remind you of your own.